All right, I think we should go ahead and get started now. We might have a few people joining us late, but that is fine. So hello, and thank you all for joining us tonight for this presentation from James Castle House resident Cole Calvin. My name is Kristen Hill. I am the Cultural Sites Program Coordinator for the James Castle House, and I'm here tonight with Lavona Andrew, who will be providing ASL interpretation for this event, and of course, Cole Calvin. So before we move into this event, I'd just like to give a little information, a little introduction to the James Castle House. For anyone who's unfamiliar with us, the James Castle House celebrates the life and work of American artist James Castle through exhibitions, community programs, research, residency programs, and conservation of the historic spaces where Castle lived and worked for over 4 decades. The James Castle House is a program of the Boise City Department of Arts and History, which offers many other services, including public art, history programs, archives, cultural grants, and care and conservation. So I want to thank the City of Boise for continuing to support and remaining committed to the work that we are doing with the Arts and History Department. We would also like to acknowledge the broader history of the land the James Castle House sits on. We recognize the ancestral, cultural, traditional, and unceded territory of the Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute people whose land the site is on today. So thank you again for joining us today and for all of your continued support of the arts and cultural community. We strongly encourage your engagement tonight. We're going to have a question and answer period at the end of Cole's presentation. So please feel free to jot down your thoughts or write them in the Q&A, any thoughts or questions you might have for Cole, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So now on to the main event here. So I'm going to introduce Cole Calvin. Cole Calvin is a multidisciplinary artist living and working in Boise, Idaho. As a gay, Black, biracial man, Cole's works explore concepts of racial and sexual identity and how those ideas inform his experience of the world around him. Working primarily with clay and semi-precious metals, Cole creates pieces that shift from functional to fine art. His sculptures and jewelry range from narrative collections to individual works inspired by the natural world. When creating new works, Cole takes into consideration the ways in which his audience might interact with the work. So an awareness of how a piece feels in the hand or relates to the body. Through his exploration, he engages the senses beyond the visual and into a more visceral and tangible relationship between art and audience. So we are delighted to have Cole as our inaugural project resident. This is a new program for us. Project residencies are something that we have created to provide opportunities for collaborations that are a little bit outside of our standard residency model. So Cole jumped right into his time at the James Castle House. He's been exploring Castle's artwork and taking inspiration from them into his metalsmithing practice. So over the past 5 weeks, he's created a small range of wearable product prototypes. And over the next few weeks, he will continue to create and finesse the selection in his own studio. So narrowing them down to a final 3 from which the James Castle House will select one, and that will be offered exclusively through our general store. So tonight, Cole will share a little bit more about himself and his practice and the experience that he has had while in residence at the James Castle House. Please welcome Cole Calvin.
Hi, thank you, Kristen. I appreciate it. Thank you, Lavona. Thank you to the James Castle House, the City of Boise, and the James Castle Collection Archives. It's been a real treat to kind of share in this collaborative project to produce these little art objects. So I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Cole Calvin, as Kristen so graciously introduced before. I studied at Boise State. I have a degree, a Bachelor of Fine Arts in ceramics and metalsmithing. And with those, I've kind of been exploring kind of what those arts and what those mediums mean to me. So I'm very heavily process driven. I really enjoy the process of making art and the practice of that like daily almost ritual of committing to living like a deliberate life, engaging with your art from day to day. And specifically creating something that is like a object you care to hold and feel and be a part of your everyday life. So I've been super excited to kind of invest into James Castle's work. I'd say the first time I really engaged with his artwork would be when the James Castle House opened, and I had the opportunity to come visit and see the residence space for the first time and the gallery they have. I think Castle's work is the most well-known Castle work is his works made with soot and spit, as you can see here, the bedroom, with soot from an oven or a stove, and like his own spit as a medium to kind of bind everything, and using just found objects to create just these very interesting and intentional kind of interior scapes, as well as landscapes, and what I've started to think of as like little cameos and IDs. So I was also kind of captivated by the alphabets that Castle would organize, made from kind of our Latin alphabet with some kind of Greco-Roman alphabets in there, some Cyrillic as well. The interesting shapes and kind of symbols that he created in his work were also all captivating. So I guess I'll just kind of jump into where I found like main connections as I began to do research on James Castle is his life just in Idaho, born in Garden Valley, and his family operating a postal service up there. Like I have family, my mother's worked in the postal service, and I think it's just a matter of the way my brain works in terms of always trying to find connection and find a pattern and see how things kind of align, similarities and differences. I think those kind of ideas and train of thought is kind of where I initially go. As I started to draw these personal connections in terms of like both of our families having connections to the post office. I grew up in a house that's 4 blocks away from here. This is like very much my neighborhood. This is always like a house that is not what it was today, but I remember it vaguely in my memory as a child. And so just connecting with this area of town, being from Idaho myself, and getting to see such a prolific artist kind of come from my neighborhood is really exciting. So in my research, I started to find images like these interior scapes of castles. You can see this bed and the dresser, also very familiar to me as in my stay here. They found a similar bed that I was sleeping on in the residence space with a little dresser that's very similar to this one. And it's in these little details that connect the James Castle house to my viewing of his work that I really started to find interest in some of the smaller details. So, So here you see what looks like just an interior space of castles. And on the upper left and right, you can see folds of what appears to be an envelope. So kind of speaks to the material use that he was working with, a lot of found objects, a lot of found materials, whether it's cardboard boxes that then are turned into these like panoramic scapes of these interior scapes, which are really gorgeous. I found he has a fascination, or he appears to have a fascination with like doors and windows. You can see a little front-on view of the home Castle had rendered here. Little studies of kind of the mundane, the everyday, just bowls and plates and cups on a shelf. And as a potter, I'm obviously interested whenever there's a connection to something I'm working on. And what appears to be here is little boxes or an image of other drawings that he's created. we might see a little bit later one of the books that he would create. And I had the opportunity to go to the James Castle Collection Archive and see how prolific he really was in his art practice. So I think I have a feeling that some of these might be some of his drawings. Some of the alphabets I was referring to earlier, I really enjoyed just seeing how the uppercase and lowercase, how those kind of transition, and just some of these invented almost phrases or symbols, knowing that Castle was nonverbal and deaf, I always question what it was that he was, what he knew this to be, what these letters meant to him and how he engaged with them. So it's a kind of the excitement and the mystery of James Castle that I've been kind of excited about working with and kind of discovering more when I was in my practice. So that none at the top left has always interested me. It looks like an N-O-N-E, and just a strange phrase that kind of pops up throughout some of his work. See the ampersand and the question mark in the top left are what looks like a little home character that appears in the bottom right as well. I find that interesting. And then I found these to be almost as if they were like little letters or postcards. This blahs at the bottom is a character or kind of a signature that appears in some of his writings as well. Really interested by these more circular, like elegant forms at the top there. And then below is a picture of these calendars or these little registers of squares. Sometimes they're individual pictures within the square, sometimes they're expanding beyond the individual square's borders and overlapping into another. So I found that little square or rectangular format to be a good place to start for some of the pieces I was making. Again, speaking to the material choices there, these are like humble materials that just kind of, found materials, things that he collected and kept for later use. So it's just interesting to see. Say coffee ice cream looks like a recipe book here, which I think is just fun. Here's an image of a little interior scape here. I was really attracted to this little floral motif on the wallpaper that he chose to kind of express here. And I'm really excited because I chose to use that in some of my pieces and see how it kind of translates, whether it's successful or not. I think it could take a little more development, but I'm excited to show you those. Again, on the right in the ceiling there. Something to observe here too is in contrast to the peoples and characters that Castle would render, these interiors seem very specific and very like as an understanding of space and scale. And then when you move on to these kind of more pattern and geometric pieces, the figures are a little more abstracted. And these little blockhead creatures here, or not creatures, people, I guess. I don't know what to call them. And then again here, like these landscapes and exterior and interior spaces are so well rendered, and then really kind of distills people down to just these kind of rectilinear monoliths almost. So I find them very interesting. These X's in this kind of chevron or herringbone pattern you see here is something that influenced some of the work I made during the residency. I found it to just be so simple and elegant, but like interesting. And I want to explore that more and see kind of what that looks like. You can see the combination of the X's and the chevrons or herringbone is pretty significant here. I love the little piece of Idaho creamery, address we can find today. I think it's cool. It's cool to see the connection to the past that he's solidified in these little arts. More patterns. And it's almost as if the scribbles, I think they look like text or something, or a description of the image above, as if it were in a textbook or something. One of those patterns I really enjoy. Some color work here. I really found this fun. It was like the security like pattern on the inside of envelopes. It reminds me of like my childhood and sitting on the phone and then doodling on the side of like bills and stuff or mail letters that were just sitting there. And then here's what I imagine kind of to be the reference for some of those chevron and I guess herringbone pattern is more like agrarian, like workwear, like very much tied to agriculture, and imagining this part of town and this space, there's still lots of lots where people have horses, and it's kind of the farmland area, I can imagine it being. So I feel like this denim print was maybe seen everywhere. So oftentimes these trees are kind of referred to as like lollipop trees, and I like just the monolithic shape of them, and the way he chooses to depict his trees are just like these really dense kind of bundles in some of his imagery. An exterior shot of a building with a number of the backs of people. Kind of interesting, I found. And then again, kind of this perspective of these doors that appear throughout some of his work. He captures these images of doors or windows, and I thought these were two good examples of the constructions that he would put together with the found materials. So these are some photos of some of the artifacts found here on the property at the James Castle House and that are on display in the gallery space. And I just thought it was interesting, I think speaking to some of the material natures and some of those like little coveted items that I find myself attracted to and stowing away in boxes, and I guess for myself hoarding in a number of ways. It's refreshing to see that other people have a fascination with the small, the intricate, and like little delicate pieces. So collector of calendars and numbers. He's got some other works in his in the collection of James Castle's work that are more invented calendars, like no October, and then there's like 36 days in it or something. So those are always fun to see as well. And then a picture of James himself. I wanted to share a little bit of my work before we jump into the examples of what I've made for the project residency. And so I kind of wanted to jump in with some old academic work of mine. This is the Brer Rabbit series I did based off of Brer Rabbit, the stories of Brer Rabbit and Uncle Remus. Some of them are a little, I guess, inappropriate for this time with our kind of current understanding of race and identity. So this one was based off of Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby, and a little enclosure or kind of objects I made with it, like a kind of a big cauldron there with a tar stick to kind of stir the tar. These are kind of there's 3 pieces that are kind of in this little collection built around the stories of Brer Rabbit. One is Brer Rabbit and the Well. And here you can see I made a little well. And then Brer Rabbit makes $1 a minute. Interesting imagery here with the like snare trap, and then a little image of myself as a child as well, kind of connecting it to myself, and I mind the gold tooth on all of these, kind of connecting it to kind of Black culture in the contemporary. So a collection of pendants I have made, what I called hedrons. These are kind of referencing faceted gemstones and just kind of that sacred geometry, occult kind of perspective about kind of these precious objects. These are all from, except the one on the left, are hollow form, so they're fabricated from sheet and then scored and folded. You can see there one on the top there, some hollows and some rings I made as well. More hedrons. A couple shots of this one here. I was joking with Kristen before this as I was preparing for this, and I was like, God, they're kind of phallic. And I was only when they were, kind of staring me in the face that I realized it. So a small commission piece, but I really like the way these kind of the weight of them, the way they kind of rest in your hand, the facets when polished have a gleam to them, so they kind of catch the eye. So some more occult symbols from like tarot and a little snake. This process of being at the James Castle House has also been more of a reinvestment of my artistic energies. I took a little bit of time off as I had an accident in the studio about 2 years ago, and then the pandemic happened. So this has been a great jumping off point for me to reinvest my energies and my time back into making and producing artwork. So I feel very fortunate for this. So some of the process shots of making these rings, oftentimes they're fabricated from wire, but I was insistent on them being one whole piece. So I was cutting them from thick sheet metal and then filing them down into the profiles from left to right. You can kind of see the process shots there. And a signet ring I made with like a faceted face, which can kind of imply maybe like a fractured identity. I did some collaborative work with a friend of mine, working on casting some badger claws and a set of bobcat claws that she came across. And so I was really struck by the amount of detail we were able to capture with this small little line we put together. And I was really happy with seeing like the little bits of fur and kind of just all sorts of like sinew bits on it. So I was happy with these pieces here. I do a little bit of stonework, stone setting with like fabricated, like custom fabricated enclosures. This person wanted a little ankh on the back, so kind of speaking to some Egyptian imagery there. Another piece there, more claw setting. This is a little dowsing pendulum I made. I've always been interested by like the mysterious, the magical, the fantastical, and just the occult kind of tools, the tools like implements of the craft or someone's spiritual or ritualistic practices. And so I had made this with someone in mind and was excited with the end result there. This series I was jokingly been calling the one-eyed snake that bit me, as this was what I was working on when I had an accident in the studio. And to spare you all the gruesome details, we'll just say I bumped my eye with something sharp. And so that left me a little shaken about returning to the studio and continuing with my art practice. So another one there. I just love the subtle shifts and like meandering curves of them. I feel like they're really elegant and beautiful. So I think that is all I have for my past work. I want to jump in to kind of show you some of the works I've been working on here at the James Castle House. So just give me one moment while I transition over there. All right. Oop. right, just want to make sure everyone can hear me there. So here we have that Blas name that kind of came up with one of Castle's kind of characters there. This is more of a direct reference, just trying to work on process. This was, pardon my dirty hands, I've been bit up by saw blades and files there, but but yeah, like I said, the little signature that was almost seemed like a letter. This character Blas always comes up. He always comes up looking in a little bit of 3/4 there, with his little vest on and tie. But I uh, accomplished this piece with a technique that's called chasing. It's where you use a small tool and hammer out these little lines. You can see, so they're kind of just following those lines there. And it's almost like drawing those lines in with a hammer and a little chisel there. So that's our little tool there for the chasing and process. You can see it's a little meant to be a little brooch. I worked with a couple different clasps in the beginning and settled on one I'll show you later, but this is just like a simple design I was working on, just trying to think through different ways of closing the back there. A lot of what I'm working on is pieces that were meant to, I'm just trying to discover what the best process is for discovering this, how it's going to fall on the wearer, how they can kind of interact with it. This is an example of some of those X marks that I found interesting. Almost looks like a little coin, which reminded me I wanted to use a little round shape because I saw those coins in the collections of that were found in the space there. Here you can see some of that flower design that was found on the walls that I was really I really enjoyed. I think this one is a little more successful than the other. Kind of a trial failed on my little circle there, but I was happy with the fine detail I was able to achieve there. As well as chasing, I was working with engraving as well. So kind of practicing a couple different methods for mark making on the metal. It's not quite as simple as applying the soot and spit. Not to say that that's easy to kind of learn that process, but just a different handling of materials here. So this is what's called a graver, and it's used to kind of press out all these little lines there in circles. So I was happy with the way that turned out as well. Thinking of maybe a little more literal objects as well, the James Castle house with those X's there. Working through them. This is one of the images or one of the little cutouts that I made in the first days that I was here, just kind of looking at those letters that were kind of invented by him. I know it looks like a zodiac sign as well, but I thought it would make a really cool if it was backed with a different colored metal or something with a different finishing on it. So I was kind of interested by the depth of these pieces and the layers, and then having something else maybe on the reverse. So that tactile feeling of kind of flipping something over your hand, investigating and seeing what's on both sides of it is always important to me in making a piece and making sure there's always something of interest on all sides there. So one of my favorite little letters of his was this one. I thought it was just so elegant and had just a nice flow to it. I was really happy with the way this turned out, treated with a sand blasting finish there to kind of give it more of a soft finish there, kind of give a little twinkle as well. Meant to be a brooch similar to this one here with a little spring back pin. And that excitement and mystery of Castle's work that I was initially kind of left with is what kind of gave me these the idea to that, exclamation point, the question mark, those are, they represent feelings and kind of an idea. And I thought it would be cool to represent that with these pieces here. Again, a nice brooch. I think people need to wear more brooches. I think they're just so fancy. A fascinator, a little conversation starter there. So you can kind of see in finer detail there. Don't mind my solder. My college instructor would be so disappointed. So, and then I guess I'll move back to some of those other patterns and geometric shapes I was really interested by. I love the X's here and that herringbone pattern, a version I did with the engraver, so it's a little bit finer here. And you can, like, even though the little engraved marks have catch a little bit of light there. So I was inspired by the simplicity of some of the objects found in those boxes here at the studio or at the gallery. So I thought doing something that's similar to like a little safety pin would be interesting. So I fabricated this small safety pin clasp that I think would look really nice on a coat. I like the movement of them as they move and might catch the eye. Another piece here. This is done with the chasing technique, but I just like the solidity of all of the, or like kind of like the stark mark making that happens with chasing. And you really got to commit there. So again, that the more traditional clasp there as well. The rare choice to use silver here was influenced by one of the images of Castle's work where he wrote his alphabet, but it was almost reversed as if it was on a letterpress block. Let's see if I can get the focus there. There we go. And I thought that was really interesting. So I wanted to kind of replicate that and see what I could produce with it. So I made these little solid bars with holes drilled through them, as if they could be earrings or maybe a part of a pendant there. So I really enjoyed, I think finally I've got two more pieces here to show you. This being one of them. There was quite the dreamlike quality to some of these. And I'm referencing some of his like landscape images here. And while you see the edges shiny, the center has been mattified by sandblasting and then applying layer upon layer of liver of sulfur into those little textured patterns there. But it gives it a nice soft quality, maybe not knowing what's in the distance, what in that image is like, what are these? These look like trees, but what is the structure here? Just all the more interesting. And another kind of work in progress here is kind of these 5 trees with these kind of shadow of trees behind them, similar to the lollipop trees he's created in some of his work, and the kind of monolithic figures that he has depicted in for people. So I just wanted to kind of capture that same feeling of that regimented line of people, of trees, and share my take on it. So, all righty. I'm going to jump back on. And that's kind of the work I've been working on. I hope we can kind of come to a further resolution of some of these ideas and distill them down to more of a finished product that I can present to the James Castle House and find something that will be a good selection for the general store. So.
Thank you so much, Cole. That was amazing. I love being able to see your works that close up and that fine detail as you're showing them in the light. They're so beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm certain that we're going to have something amazing. I mean, it's guaranteed.
Great.
We have a couple of questions from people and a couple of comments. So are you ready to get started in that
Right.
arena?
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. So we've got a question. Is there any heating involved in making the jewelry as opposed, or as someone who is interested in art of all kinds, I am always interested in how it is made.
Yeah. And I think as makers, you're always like, how did they do that? How did you make that? And I love being able to share that. I think, yeah, so metals are oftentimes, most of the time, unless you're using cold connections, you're using a torch to soften the metals called annealing, or to melt pieces down, and prepare them for the next stage of the process. There's little cycles that are ended up created in the metals smithing process where you are hammering a piece, it becomes work hardened, you take the torch to it, it softens those molecules and kind of, it's called annealing, and lets them kind of settle back to where they're nice and pliable again. And you just kind of rinse and repeat until you come to your final project there.
Sounds so simple.
Right? You know.
All right, we've got another question. Is the weight of the pendant hedrons light or heavy?
They're lighter than you would assume because they're hollow. They are made from like thin, like 20 gauge silver, and I use a technique called scoring and folding. And you basically create a little V channel that then, when you fold it together, it gets sealed up. They're rather light compared to their size. They kind of measure in the like 1 to 2 inch range, and like about 1/2 to 1 inch in width. So I think if you imagine that being a solid piece of silver, that would weigh you down, but they're rather light and elegant.
I agree. Why did you decide to do this residence versus something different? And did you have prior interest in James Castle?
I think just my connection to Boise and friends who, who've always been interested in the arts. I have a interest in Idaho art, and artists that have a connection to Idaho. So I discovered James Castle when I opened the house. And yeah, I was really excited for this residency because I was making a bit of a transition out of the service industry. So I think, as many people did during the last few years of the pandemonium, they've kind of reevaluated some things, and I decided to reinvest in myself and dig a little deeper into my art practice. So this has been an amazing opportunity to kind of live as an artist and wake up, make my little breakfast and coffee, and then really just start researching and working on my art. So I think it's kind of kickstarted my art practice and got me back on track for feeling like an artist again. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
We have a comment, just yay, Cole, nice work.
Thank you. I think I saw that from John Conti. Thank you, John.
Wow, I'm so impressed with the level of detail here. I can't believe you were able to render a castle artwork either. Bravo.
Thank you.
So what drew you to metalsmithing and ceramics?
I think it's the physical nature of it, the physicality, the three-dimensionality of it. I want to be able to touch something to kind of like fully examine it. I think, as one of the other commenters or persons who asked about a question, it was more so like, how did you make it? You want to know how it's made, and you want to like really analyze something. And I think it speaks to Castle's work because he was always observing the inside of his, or the outside spaces that he was inhabiting. So I think in that same observational perspective, it led me to want to learn how to make something like that. So I've worked in clay since I was in high school, and always enjoyed that. That's what my degree was in. And then when I finally came to the end of my college career, I needed some extra 3D classes and fell in love with metals after the first class. Annika Smolovitz, who's the professor at Boise State, is an incredible professor and definitely ran me through the paces there, just to kind of like pushes her students to towards excellence. So
that's incredible. We have another question that kind of additionally asks about the practice selection of metal and ceramics. So I think that got answered, but also wants to add that the last two works are incredible because of the haze and shadow that spur the imagination and are very dreamlike. And
Yes.
they're incredible, they're stunning pieces.
Yes, thank you. It's those ones those have been a more recent development. I think everything else was in the last couple of weeks, but in this last week of kind of experimenting and maybe just like, oh, I want to try this idea that I thought about and never got the chance to. It's been really cool to explore those last few pieces and really kind of work with that kind of hazy, small scale items like that. So thank you.
They're incredible. They look so dimensional in person. It's amazing. We have a question. So during your time at the James Castle House, what surprised you most about the space?
Surprising, the light in here is gorgeous. There's like windows on both sides, and sometimes in the morning you're just like, oh, I'm just like glowing in here. It's a rather it's such a clean like space ready to just be utilized. I don't know if anything was really surprised me. I visited the space before and got to kind of see the resident space and everything, but very livable. So well done. But I think one of the things that did surprise me is the use of some of the textures and details that I kept seeing throughout the house. Like the shower curtain is made up of those little flower details that I saw in Castle's interiors, and that herringbone pattern is there's a doormat, and the X's I saw on the bedspread. And it wasn't until I started investigating the work further and looking into his work, specifically in those little details, that I started to see him everywhere around the house. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. They did a really good job here. So kudos to the James Castle House for the design elements there. They're very nice.
So kind of jumping off from that question, I'm just curious, have you been surprised by any of your work during the time that you've been here?
Yeah, I mean, just getting back into the practice of making again has been really exciting and really kind of like nerve-wracking to a degree. I had, after my eye injury, I just really stopped making altogether. Sold a few pieces that I had backlogged, but it was just like there's a timidity to it. Like I wasn't like fully kind of traumatized by it, although it was kind of traumatic. I just wasn't ready yet, but this just seemed like the perfect time. And I think what has surprised me is just the exploration in the space that I have to do. And like those last two pieces I showed, I was just like thinking in new ways and applying materials in a more painterly way, in a way that's not usually used in metals. And so learning to use different applications in different ways has been exciting. So, and I really like it.
That's great. So we have a question. What was it like to move your studio into the space?
Well, fortunately, I share a studio with another artist, and together we have a good amount of tools that we've collected over the years. I kept on going back for more things, and before I knew it, I was like, I have so many tools here. There's so many specialized tools that you can use, but the reality of it is that I ended up using the basic tools that I have had since I first started doing metals. Those were my most useful tools. My small like file that has now been worn down to a nice polishing finish. My saw blade, some sanding sticks, and apart from a sandblaster, which I purchased with the funds for the residency, everything else was pretty basic. So I think I was like, oh, I need to bring this and this. I didn't need to bring all that. So keeping it simple would have probably done me just as well. So
That feels appropriate for this.
Yeah, exactly. An empty space, I must fill it.
What advice do you have for future artists who want to join the residency?
Um, just start making, document your work, for yourself to see your growth. I mean, to show your growth. I think it's important to recognize that you just need to keep on making. I think I've gone through lapses in my practice, my artist practice of starting and stopping and kind of revisiting ideas. But just keep on working, keep on making. And I mean, if I learned anything from kind of seeing the volume of work that James Castle created, it's just like make every day, because those little black and white, like cross section geometric pieces, I was a box, and in that box there was hundreds of these images that were very similar. And I looked behind me and there were dozens of these boxes. So like, keep making and just be as prolific as you can. I think that's just make as much as you can, I think that's just what's going to keep people going.
So do you have any advice for any artists who have been selected and are in residence? Is there anything that you would say to the inheritors of the the mantle?
Oh, in the future?
Yes.
I mean, if you need any help, let me know. I'm happy to be a local resource for you.
Kind.
But yeah, I don't know. I'd say just soak it in and just explore something new. I think these residencies are an amazing opportunity to figure out what you want to make. You can explore new possibilities, and you have the time and the space to do so. So be experimental.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Besides James Castle, who are some of the artists or creators who have influenced you in your art?
Keith Lewis, he's a metalsmith, and kind of huge around the ACT UP in the 80s, kind of like the organization that was like battling the AIDS epidemic. He's got a lot of, so I think a gay artist that has a lot of like kind of sexually charged artwork, but it's all very dense and elaborate and beautiful. I'm oftentimes surprised by how much I kind of take in from my fellow artists that I'm around. I'm always inspired by people who are continually making. I think that's the most impressive thing, is people who just like dedicate their lives to making art and just commit to it. So that's what I kind of admire in makers and in artists.
So we have another question. You touched upon identifying with Castle while living in the space. Are there other ways you ended up identifying with him?
I think just like when my mind works, like I'm just always looking for parallels and drawing like connections, so I swear to God, someone touched me in the middle of the night on my shoulder. I don't know, I'm not sure, but I think it might have been him, like pat me on the shoulder, like good job, keep at it. I don't know. This place isn't haunted, I don't think so. But as far as what was the question again? I'm not sure. Oh, like the connection. I think it's just kind of trying me in my mind, looking for patterns and connections, and then seeing all of the patterns that he makes and seeing some like the through lines of his work. It's like your next work is connected to your previous work. It's almost like a stepping stones to kind of find that final product. And I think some of my work shows that progression as well. So yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm just gonna end this with a comment that we have. The brooches are beautiful. I'm looking forward to seeing what is what is put on sale at the James Castle House, as are we.
Well, thank you so much.
Sorry, one more question just came in. Are you open for one more?
I think I can take it.
Okay. Seriously, such stunning work. With having such an opportunity to create in a space like the James Castle House and spark in your work, what direction do you see your work heading?
I want to just continue as a working artist. I've shifted gears. I I'm teaching ceramic classes and working in a clay studio right now. It's very fulfilling, but I want to pursue other opportunities with other residency programs, and just kind of growing as an artist myself. So I think it's just, this has been an amazing opportunity, and it's like almost a jumping off point for me to kind of pursue other ventures as a resume builder. So I'm so grateful and so fortunate to have been included in the roster of amazing artists you've selected for the James Castle House. So I have nothing but gratitude for everything I've been given in the last year. So thank you.
Well, we are also super happy to have been able to have you at the James Castle House. It has been a delight, as I mentioned. And thanks so much for sharing so much about yourself and your work tonight.
Thank you.
It's great to learn about. Thank you, Lavona, for interpreting tonight's presentation. So for, just for everyone's knowledge, Lavona has been working with the James Castle House since we opened, basically, in 2018. We've worked with her a lot, and she's amazing. It's always a pleasure to work with her again. I also want to thank the James Castle Collection and Archive and the Smithsonian American Art Museum for generously allowing us to use the beautiful images of castle artworks that we saw tonight. And thank you all for joining us tonight. We really hope that you will enjoy it and that you will join us for future events at the James Castle House. We are open again for our full hours and having some events on site and some virtually. So in either case, we are always happy to see you. And if you're interested in any future events, you can find them all at our website, jamescastlehouse.org. I will pop a link in the chat so that you can find our website more easily. And if anyone has any questions for Cole, feel free to reach out to us and we'll pass it along. Yeah, thank you so much, Cole.
Thank you.